Hello, after my last video, I had some comments and questions relating to what aspects of using a cloud practice management you might want to look out for in the service level agreements and warranties. Because I had said, it's a good idea to read through these and make sure that you know what on your end you're required to keep up to date as far as HIPAA goes, your data goes, and the computers you're attaching. Because what I'm trying to go over here is what you need to look out for in your particular cloud practice management solution, what you need to read in the contract, at least a few things to look out for, and to be aware of, just so you know you're taking care of your data appropriately, moving into this new space that you may have not be fully comfortable with. I mean, we all know that with basic client server setups, of course you're fully required to keep a backup, keep your data encrypted and secure, keep your operating systems updated, keep your antivirus protection up to date, and so on and so forth. One thing that is probably worth looking at is the CDT provision, if your contract has one. So your CDT codes, anyone who's ever had a practice management software is well aware that every year you kind of pay this little fee to get your CDT codes, and these codes are pretty important because what they kind of do is standardize a code that refers to a procedure, and this primarily impacts your ability to process that procedure through someone's insurance. Having the correct CDT code could change whether or not the insurance actually covers the procedure and not, or whether or not they even know what procedure you're talking about, so they know where to file it under. And in this particular practice management contract, I noticed a little addendum they added onto their contract, and I don't know how long. I don't know if this has always been here or not. Last time I read through this particular contract was a couple years back. Right here, as it says, you acknowledge that this company's ability to provide you with updated versions of the CDT codes is dependent upon their ability to maintain a contractual relationship with the ADA. Now, the reason why that would concern me if I was, investing in this cloud practice management is I well know that in your business, any crucial software that you're using that you train your staff on, earlier on in this contract, a lot of these companies charge staff training on a daily fee basis. That means they're going to charge you for 8 hours of training. So, you've got a big investment into having these different softwares. There's a pretty big cost if you ever want to leave the software. So I'm always interested in anything in a contract that may result in me not enjoying the use of the product in the future. And then, should I want to leave that software or company or whatever, I realize I'm going to incur some pretty big costs. I mean, that's why we take so much time looking over lease agreements, right? Because when you lease an office and you move in, you spend a lot of time and money moving in, getting the office ready for your use. So we do a lot of things like make sure we know what our rent is going to be for the next 10 years and so on. And software as a service is an interesting thing because you don't really know what your rent is going to be next year, do you? I mean, you would move your dental practice into an office and sign a 1-year lease because hey, there was a local restaurant in my hometown. There wasn't a lot of commercial property of note, but there was one particular commercial property where the owner of the property had some prime real estate for coming in off the main highway and so on, and this had always been rented to restaurants. And overwhelmingly what would happen would be, with each year of the restaurant's success, their rent would go up almost proportional to their success. I mean, the owner of the land was well aware that the more success you had in a location, the higher he could raise the rent, and the more you'd be willing to suffer through that raised rent on your next contract to maintain the profitability of your location, because you can't just up and pull roots on your business and move without having a loss of business. So, looking at cloud service contracts, I would look at them very similarly to a lease. You're making a pretty big investment. If you go out there and you buy a practice management software and you put it on your server, one I can think of that I like, Open Dental. I mean, they do require you to carry support for a year, but after that, you can drop the support. Now, granted, you don't pay anything to get it to begin with. So you kind of paying for your year of support is how you're paying for the software, but you're not required to carry support to keep it. So you could keep that Open Dental on your server for as long as it's still usable for you. They won't come and just turn your server off one day. But when you're talking about software as a service, you're literally talking about a situation where they're going to bill you monthly, and at any time they can raise that fee. And if they raise that fee and you don't like it, they're going to switch off your access to your server, basically. So, looking at these contracts is much more important. So, this aspect of this contract where getting the CDT codes is dependent upon, a continuing relationship with the ADA. Well, obviously that would be the case, right? I mean, the ADA is who's issuing the CDT codes, but if you kind of read between the lines, or potentially, who knows what their intent was when they wrote this, but it does seem to give them the ability to, let's say they can't reach an agreement. I mean, and this is just my opinion, but it seems to be written in the aspect that if they ever didn't want to pay the fee to obtain the new CDT codes next year, they could just not obtain them, not pay that fee. Now you're using their software. Now you don't have the updated CDT codes, and I don't know how you could get them. I mean, could you go license them yourself from the ADA and then directly type them into your cloud practice management? But this would be something I'd be concerned about. This would be similar to so you can see how that could negatively impact you, especially in a situation where I assume, even though you don't have the newest CDT codes, I assume your licensing fees for the software would not go down. So in this situation, if they didn't update the CDT codes, are they going to refund you your money? Are they going to lower your fees for the next year? Or are you going to pay the same amount but kind of get less? Okay, right over here is where I would kind of reflects on something I was talking about with HIPAA, which is a lot of people that get cloud practice management softwares maybe not be as concerned with their obligations to HIPAA, kind of feeling like, well, the cloud service provider is kind of handling most of my obligations, and I certainly don't want any of our clients or anyone else that comes to our YouTube channel or does business with us, I don't want them to ever get hit with any HIPAA fee, or really even the bigger deal is to ever lose all their practice data and substantially probably lose a great deal of money. So this is something I want people to be aware of, is the service does not replace the need for you to maintain regular data backups or redundant data archives. This cloud service provider says they shall have no obligation or liability for any loss, alteration, destruction, damage, corruption, or recovery of customer data for something, where you're like, yeah, the worst possible scenario of jumping out of an airplane when you go skydiving is that your chute doesn't open, and then your backup chute doesn't open, and then you plummet to the ground and you nosedive and die. And sure, maybe that's very unlikely, right? But it's something you consider before you go up there. And one of the things in here that actually concerns me, I'm less concerned about the destruction or damage or corruption, or even the lack of liability for them to maintain the backup for you, because I hope they give you some portal to back up the software. I mean, I personally, before I would invest my money in this cloud service and transfer all my practice management data to it, I mean, I think one of the first things I would do is ask myself and ask them and have them show me, okay, how do I back up? Show me a test provider office, and show me a backup of the data, and then show me what that data looks like when it's backed up. Like, what kind of format is it in? It says here that you're required to maintain your own backups. Well, okay, but what format do you get that backup in? And if you can if you've ever had to export something from a website so that you could use it in Excel or something like that, sure. Comma separated value is a great way to get something into a table in Excel. But when you talk about a gigantic database and you are going to export that as a CSV, I have literally seen data handlers not be able to handle CSV files of significant sizes. You may end up with this text document that's literally too large for not your computer, but too large for the program that has to open it. So, I mean, before I made an investment like this, I would want to know, let's say one day they sell this. They sell this practice management software, and the new company that buys it wants to double your rent, wants to take you from $1,500 a month to $3,000 a month. Maybe they want to change their pricing scheme altogether and start changing it by data use or bandwidth use. Maybe instead of just charging you on a per user basis, they start charging you for maintenance of data. Most companies have kind of stopped doing it now, but for a while there, broadband providers, when Netflix and these other online services came out and people were suddenly using a lot more data, they suddenly started putting bandwidth caps on people's broadband, and people had never even considered that. They were paying for a service. They were paying for access to the internet at a certain speed. And suddenly the company was like, well, now it's not just, the speed you're paying for literally X amount of data transferred. I mean, we're used to that with cell phones, and it's expected in cell phones, but when it happened with home broadband connections, people were, outraged. But that's okay, because you can turn off your internet at home, and yes, life is very inconvenient and uncomfortable for you. But if this happens to you with something that literally runs your whole dental practice, it's a lot harder to turn off that switch and make a different decision. So when I read something like no obligation or liability for any alteration of data, alteration is more concerning to me than destruction. If a client comes in one day and suddenly a hard drive is dead, and the mirrored hard drive is dead, we're talking triple, I don't know, they come in and the server is melted to the floor and there's nothing left of it. Well, we know what happened. We restore from the previous night's backup, and no harm, no foul. What can actually be more destructive to a data set is if it starts getting altered without your knowledge. I mean, what if just like the chart of accounts starts changing, treatment planning starts changing, what the chart's wrong? I know that the expectation is that every time you see a patient, you confirm your chart is correct. Obviously, you're doing an exam, you're looking at it, but people also rely on the chart to make inferences, make decisions, make diagnostic decisions. So when you're talking about a data set like this, and when a company is relieving itself of any responsibility for alteration, that's concerning. And like, I'm not saying don't use the service. I'm just saying, be aware and be concerned. Be prepared as well. Like what kind of backups can you do to protect yourself from this? Okay, this is another thing that I would look at, and that's obviously when you're talking about a cloud service, you have to think about it as your access to that service is not really within your control. Honestly, it's just like you have a server and you put it in someone else's office and they have to turn it on for you every day, otherwise you can't use it, right? So, when you're talking about your access to a cloud practice management software, I mean, a lot of people try and claim like, well, it's a lot safer than, having to maintain your own server. People's computers break all the time. Most computers will just sit there and run. I mean, most computers are broken by users. And so one of the benefits of servers is that servers don't normally have a user sitting at them. But if you think about how many times your internet's gone down, you're going to have that. And obviously that's not the cloud service provider's responsibility. But now, you got to think about how many times did your internet go down last year? And our internet goes down at one office and the other office is still up, still answering the phone, still taking care of business. They can still do everything for our customers. I mean, a dental office doesn't have that luxury because the customers are physically there and need to be physically treated there. So yeah, I guess, so your internet goes down. Sure, you can run off they suggest you could get a backup cellular modem. Be like, okay, well, now you're paying an extra $75 or $100 a month, whatever, for that jetpack to plug in to have that backup internet connection. But, all right. So you can try and deal with your access to the internet. But when I'm looking at a contract, one thing I want to be concerned about is what's my access to the company where they control their end. And a lot of people are like, oh, the cloud never goes down. That's not true. They have their downtimes, and so you have to consider like, so what's their downtime and what are they guaranteeing me for uptime? Like, because they may say something like, oh, your data is hosted on a bunch of different sites. Well, yeah, that's true. If you're using the Amazon cloud, your data is hosted on a bunch of different sites. But if the Amazon cloud itself has a protocol failure or something that takes down the Amazon cloud, which is what has happened a few times, it doesn't matter how many sites they had it at, the main protocol goes down and the service is stopped. So I have to rely on what they promise in their warranty and in the contract they provide. So when I look at that warranty and I see something like it make no representation, warranty, or guarantee as to the reliability, timeliness, quality, suitability, truth, availability, accuracy, or completeness of the service or any content, that concerns me. How much business do you lose if your dental office goes down for 4 hours? I mean, you're talking about total loss here during that time period, and they don't guarantee it'll operate in any combination with any other hardware, software system, or data. Well, you can't use it without other hardware, and they're not guaranteeing it'll work with other hardware. But you're talking about a zero guarantee here thing. I mean, at least you're aware of it. If you're aware of it when they go down, you already know there's no one you can call to complain to. I wouldn't like that if it was me. If it was my dental practice, especially in the aspect where, okay, so what I see time and time again when I'm looking at marketing material for the cloud are articles like this. But this so this is what I'm talking about. This is what they're advertising. So that you're 24/7 access to your data from any location. Well, they're advertising that, and they're advertising peace of mind, and they're advertising automatic backups and software updates. Then at the same time, they're telling you we don't warranty accessibility. We don't give you a contract that says you'll have 24/7 access, and they're not responsible if you don't. More importantly, as far as peace of mind goes, they're telling you you're still responsible for doing all your own backups and incremental backups. How do you have more about peace of mind? A lot of these places advertise like you get a 24/7 IT person basically, but then you find out, well, if you issued the ticket after 8 p.m. Eastern, actually they don't get to it till the next day. So I guess you don't really have 24/7. I'm not really sure why they would say you do and then kind of remove it in the next sentence. I've talked to several dentists and they tell me that on average they end up paying around $1,500 a month for their cloud practice management for a normal single provider office. This is just about if you are going to go with a cloud solution, read your contracts thoroughly, see if there's any service level agreement that guarantees you any type of uptime, what kind of a situation you're in if you ever want to switch. Are there any provisions in the contract that kind of glaringly stare out to you? Hey, these are all things worth looking at. So anyway, I hope this helps. Hey, if you like this information, it'd be great if you could hit that thumbs up button and, share it out to anyone that you think this information might be valuable to.